Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the Johns Hopkins School of Education, Doctor of Philosophy in Education virtual webinar. My name is Tanya McMillan, and I am an admissions coordinator here at the School of Education. Also joining me today, I have my colleague from the Office of Admissions, and she will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sion John, Assistant Director of Admissions here at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Welcome.
Next, I would like to share the agenda for today's virtual webinar. Next slide. Thank you. Dr. Gilbeck will go over details of the Doctor of Philosophy program and also discuss tips for a successful PhD application. We will also review admissions requirements, and there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So we invite you to type your questions in the chat box, and we will read and answer your questions. Moving on to our faculty presenter today, Dr. Hunter Gilbeck is our PhD program lead at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. He joined the School of Education in 2019 and received his PhD at Stanford University. Dr. Gilbeck's research focuses on improving the social and motivational context of schools. Additionally, he received the Spencer Foundation Mid-Career Award in 2016. Welcome, Dr. Gilbeck. We appreciate you joining us today.
Great. Well, thank you. It's a delight to be here, and I'm excited to be able to do both a little online and in person. As sort of implied, right, we're going to do kind of a presentation on two levels. One is sort of like, is a Johns Hopkins PhD at School of Education the right thing for you? But the other is sort of just a more general, right? We want to be supportive no matter what. And so if some other program is a better fit, this will also hopefully be good advice and wisdom for that too. And so we're going to sort of operate on two levels in that way. And so I figured like a good place to start would be like, is the PhD the right thing for you to be doing? And I guess a sub question is, in your life right now. So as we advance on this slide, I think a huge, maybe, just that first one, slow down. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. What career do I want to pursue? Like, does that actually take a PhD? And so I think if you're thinking like, I really want to, go into a career in academia, then like, yes, you need a PhD. This is the right thing for you to be doing if that's sort of the end goal. Then there's a whole slate of like research think tank kinds of places. Like, have you heard of RAND or SRI, AIR, American Institute for Research? Those kinds of places, I think a PhD is often really beneficial, but maybe not always necessary. So it would depend a little bit on the kind of position you'd want at a place like that. Similarly, if you're interested in sort of like state level education work, so I want to set policy for the state of Maryland in education. Some of those positions, you'd probably be better off having a PhD. Some, it wouldn't really matter a ton. So think through sort of that, and bearing in mind that you might change your mind, think through that long-term vision of like, what's the kind of career pathway I want, and does it need a PhD? And I'll say one last thing, which is, maybe it's just me, and obviously I'm a bit of a biased audience, but I really liked going back to school and being a student. Like, I was a teacher for a couple of years. Like, being a teacher is really hard. Being a student, honestly, I think much easier. You can probably attest to that. And so I found it really fun. And so, again, to be clear, I was out at Stanford, so it was like sunny for 11 months out of the year, and I got to go swimming in an outdoor pool half the time. So it was like, is a career or is a PhD going to be enjoyable for you? And I think there's a lot of grad students who, either it's really tough for them financially to sort of afford their graduate program, or they just feel lots of angst and malaise. And so, that's another, like, would you be happier out in the real world? This is a question you should ask yourself. All right, if we advance one more, then I think this lifestyle question is huge. And, you know, if you're have a partner you're serious with, or kids, or, you know, like this degree has to work for your family. So a PhD typically is going to be a 4 or 5 year experience. And so your life will be somewhat different 4 or 5 years from now than it is today. And so is picking up and moving to anywhere in the country realistic or not? Is your partner or children, are they up for that? Is it going to be too stressful to not have a sort of more serious level of income? These are, I think, also questions you really should ask yourself before you're like, yes, I think this is the right thing for me to do. All right, I got one, maybe 2 more on this slide. So let's go to the next one. What do I want to study and how committed to that am I? And so absolutely, and we'll touch on the EDD in a sec, but the PhD is very, very much it's a degree of depth. Like the ideal outcome for a PhD kind of person, and I'm being a little facetious, but not completely, is I will be the world's leading expert on this very, very narrow topic. And there are a lot of other ways you can get an education where you can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and be kind of a general expert on a bunch of things. I think the EDD is probably in general sort of better situated for that. Sorry, that's a little better. All right, so last thing on this slide then. So I think that's also a weighty question. And then I think if you can go out and do research on, let me explore the Hopkins PhD. Let me see what kind of faculty are there. Who's doing what? Are these topics of interest to me? Okay, let me go over and look at University of Maryland. Let me see the faculty there. Oh, they have this program and this program. And so they're specialized, whereas the Hopkins program is an interdisciplinary program. All right, let me go look at Harvard. They have programs that are structured a little differently than Maryland. So as you investigate, it's a great way to learn, I think, or this was my experience. I was like, oh, I thought this was me. I thought school psychology sounded good because I really like this intersection of schools and psychology. But actually, no, I don't want to be a school psychologist. That is not what I want to do. And I didn't really figure that out until I researched programs and I looked at the faculty members' research interests. And so I think looking into programs and imagining what your life would be like down in College Park, here in Baltimore, up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, et cetera, can be really helpful. Like it doesn't get quite concrete in the same way as once you start looking into these programs, very specific. Awesome. Oh, last thing, please, whether you're online or here in person, let's make this a conversation. So if you're online, feel free to like pop things into the chat, and then we can have someone yell at me and interrupt. And if you're here online, you can just raise, or here in person, I should say, raise your hand and feel free to holler out. So unless there are questions at the moment, we'll maybe flip to the next slide and I can just say a little bit more about like, is this the right thing for me right now, by doing a very quick compare and contrast EDD versus PhD. So in somewhat small font, you'll see a fair bit of text that kind of compares the two. Also bearing in mind that our EDD is doing a little bit of a renovation, kind of like our building. But the big headlines are, this is a 4 to 5, the PhD is a 4 or 5 year program, full-on dissertation. The career pathways are to be an educational researcher of some ilk. And I would also maybe say an easy shorthand way to think of it is you'll be a producer of research, or this program will train you to be a producer of research. You will develop new knowledge that gets put out there into the world. The EDD program is imagining that you're going to be an educational leader of some sort and probably be maybe producing some research, but mostly kind of a consumer of research and a figure outer of how do you put research into practice. All right, so the findings say X, Y, and Z, but what should our policy be for, you know, the District of Baltimore County, that kind of thing. Yeah, anything else I want to say on this? A couple other things on a PhD that make it a little bit different. You do have to come in with a master's on both fronts, but as we'll say more about in a sec for the PhD, the question about your master's is like, how well is it setting you up to be an educational researcher? Whereas for the EDD, I think it's more how well is your master's setting you up to be a leader in the educational space and very much a practitioner. We do require, and just honestly feel like it's great experience, you to be a TA for a couple courses. So even if you're like, I really want to go be a researcher at Rand and I will never teach my own class, we still think it's really good experience because you are often in a position, almost no matter what you do coming out of our program, where you've got to explain like kind of weird, nuanced, intricate research findings to a more public audience. And so that experience teaching and being a teaching assistant, we find really helpful for building up that skill set. All right, so let me pause here. Any questions on this sort of like, is the PhD really the right thing to do? What sorts of questions should I be asking myself? Do I really want a PhD or maybe actually do I want more of an EDD? I should also note the EDD is, there is tuition that you would have to pay associated with that degree. The PhD is, we pay a small stipend, and so students get full ride, full health, dental, and then a modest stipend. But the EDD folks are presumably like working full time and holding down their regular real life jobs. And yeah, if there are no questions online, yeah, we'll keep going. All right, so what does the actual PhD look like? And we'll be very Johns Hopkins centric here, but I don't think we're a wildly different program than like what you would get at lots of places. So the coursework, we are heavier, I think, on research methods in a lot of places. Like it is one of our real strengths, I think, is rigorous research. So 18 credits worth of research methods and statistics courses, you're able to transfer in from your master's degree up to 12 credits. So you might transfer in some that tick this particular box. We also require 15, like 5 classes of core seminars, and those you're less likely to be able to transfer in just because the fit has to be pretty specific. But you're basically taking a science of learning class, which is sort of probably a little more psychology and orientation. Schools as organizations, which is more sociological and orientation. Policy, shockingly, it's policy oriented. And then there's how schools work, which is sort of supposed to pull a lot of that together. I think some students would probably argue that's a little more sociology and orientation, but definite sort of strengths in kind of psychology, sociology, trying to develop research for practitioners and policymakers. So those are kind of the 3 corners: psychology, sociology, policy. And then the 5th core seminar area is sociocultural approaches. So real emphasis on diversity and equity in the program. So you take your research methods, you do your core courses, you got some electives. A bunch of people are taking sort of dissertation credits, so they're basically just getting credit for doing research. And then the actual dissertation credits tend to be about 18-ish for most people, but credits are really not the thing that anyone stumbles over. You've got 4 years is plenty of time to take more than enough courses. And so on the next slide, what you'll see is the stuff that I think students tend to focus on more and think more about. which is a comprehensive exam, which most people are doing sort of the end of year 2. So you've had all your core courses at that point. And so this is like, hey, did you actually learn anything in those core courses? And, you know, hopefully your advisor helps you prepare. And the answer is yes, of course I did. And so there's a sort of written part to that and an oral part to that. And then that third year, not always, but most of the time, people propose their dissertation at some point during that and sort of have this vision about what the big project is going to be. And then doctoral, both dissertation and oral defense. And actually, there's both a written and oral part of the proposal as well. So we're trying to get you well versed and skilled in both sort of written communication as well as oral.
Good question.
Yeah, please.
Do you know your advisor from, is it like beginning of second year, first year, or like how does that work?
Excellent question. And we'll say a little bit more that gets at that, but I think the best advice I can give you is if you are clear on who your advisor ought to be, you should signal that. But you should signal it not in a like, you know, I must work with Professor Shelton no matter what. Because Amy Shelton just took off and is going to go head up CTY. And so saying things instead like, you know, I think my interests have really compelling overlap with existing work that's happening at the school. For example, Dr. Shelton's work on XYZ, but then also, you know, Dr. Cruz's work on ABC kind of thing. So you're showing overlap, but you're not the sort of like, unless if you feel like I must work with Dr. Shelton, otherwise none of it's worth it, then you might as well go ahead and say it. Because if she goes off to CTY and says, I'm not, sorry, Center for Talented Youth, she's going to be the new director there. If you really don't want to work with anyone else, then it's kind of this like nice self-selecting, like either she's going to be like, oh my God, you were the student I've been waiting for all these years. I don't care if my life is going to be way too busy. I'm taking you anyway. Or she's going to say, I just can't take any students. I'm sorry. Dreamy, fill your application. So for most people, I don't think, at least I'll speak for myself. When I was at your phase, like doing a lot of research on programs, quite sure I wanted to do a PhD, but still refining exactly what that was in and how I wanted to study the thing I wanted to study. I don't think I knew so much that I knew exactly it had to be this person or else. I had strong inklings. And so if you can signal who you think the right advisor or advisors would be, and then also sort of simultaneously signal the things you're wanting to study, then, you know, because there's always this possibility that Professor so-and-so has just started getting fascinated in this other topic area, but you wouldn't know that from the website. And so I think that's a good way to kind of cover your bases, if that makes sense. Excellent question. And some people ask, like, should I actually put the person's name in the essay? And that is 100% yes for us. I think it's yes for most places. Like, there's just no harm in signaling very clearly, like, I think I would be a potential advisee of so-and-so. Also, sort of, because I feel like you're Hopkins people. I give you guys pro tips I can't give other people. You know, so many of these admissions committees are like, you need a faculty member going to bat for you. And so in this, you know, similar sort of group, it's all the PhD faculty sitting around, you know, you want someone saying, I want so-and-so. I have grant money to pay for them. You know, like, it never gets hostile, but like, you know, people have strong views. No, I want my person admitted. You had your kind of person admitted 2 years ago. I haven't had one in a while. So there's, you know, so if you have someone kind of on your side going to bat for you, I think it helps a ton. Good. Okay. I see maybe a couple questions in the chat. So Does someone want to holler those out?
All right, so Dr. Galbag, we do have some couple questions. The first one is, does transferring credits mean I could finish my PhD in less than 4 or 5 years?
I think you could finish your PhD in less than 5. We definitely have people who finish in 4. I think the assumption is very much that if you transfer those 12 credits in and you're motivated and trying to tick things off pretty quickly, that you could finish in 4. I don't think we have any history of anyone finishing in less than 4. So the data would suggest that you're transfer those 12 credits in and maybe 4, maybe 5. Depends. It also depends a lot on, like, are you trying to get publications and really build up a track record for like a good postdoc or an assistant professor job at the other end, in which case more time here and more publications coming out can really help. Or did you come from AIR, American Institutes for Research, and want a job at RAND on the other end? And so you're not worried about publications and you have a track record in those kind of institutions and you just want to get through quickly. And then maybe 4 years totally makes sense.
All right, thank you, Dr. Galbach. The next question we have is, are there overlap between EDD courses and PhD courses? Can EDD courses count towards the PhD requirements?
Lovely question. Lovely, because we're working on that right now. So I indicated that the EDD is doing a little bit of a renovation, somewhat like our building. And so we're trying to figure out good fits and overlaps. The big challenge, and if you guys have brilliant ideas, we're all ears, is the EDD is online and the PhD is in person. And so that makes it a little hard. I mean, I guess it makes it not so hard for PhD students to take online, but typically, you know, it's much nicer to be in person and have synchronous courses. So there hasn't been like huge appetite for it. There may be more because of some of the specialties that get offered with the EDD. So I think we're, one of the nice things I think about our PhD program is it's very small. And so we can talk through and make kind of individualized decisions and say, you know what, for you, it kind of makes sense. Let's give it a try. And then we can see if it seems like it'd be a good thing to do more of moving ahead in the future. So I think the quick answer is not a lot of precedent, but we're very open to it. And we're working on trying to set up some classes where it would particularly work well.
All right, Dr. Galbach, do you want to move on with the presentation or continue answering the questions?
Yeah, if there are a couple more questions, let's do a couple more and then I'll forge ahead.
Sure. The next question is, considering lifestyle, kids and family, is there a possibility of completing the PhD in 6 years?
So typically, so your funding is for 4 years, and then the way people mostly are doing a 5th year is they hop on. So some faculty member will have a funded project. So if they hop on that project and the grant pays for one of their years, then they can extend their time. Like if the grant pays them enough for a year, they could extend their time by a year. It hasn't happened particularly that I'm aware of. But there's no reason it couldn't happen that a grant pays and you stay on that project for 2 years and then you graduate 6 years later. So there's no rules against that, and it would just be a matter of figuring out the funding. Yeah, good question. Thanks.
All right, the next question is there a potential for the PhD program to be offered online?
That has not been a conversation I've been any part of, and I would think if anyone is going to have that conversation, they probably want me to be a part of it. So probably not in the foreseeable future is the honest answer. And was there one more, Sion?
There is. It's a missions related question. It looks like Tanya is responding to the question right now.
Okay, great. So yeah, so let's advance to the next slide. And so this is just, to give you sort of like the real life taste of what happens to our graduates a little bit. So we do, like I said, bottom line, we're training educational researchers. So we want people who are producing knowledge. And moving left to right, Rebecca Gamez is doing that in the anthropology department at Vanderbilt. So we're a really interdisciplinary program, even if our anchors are sort of psychology, sociology, policy, it's interdisciplinary. And she took much more of a anthropological approach to a lot of her research and landed a job in an anthro department. So, and says it's very intense, but she's enjoying it. I just got an email from her today. Suyun is doing a postdoc over at University of Virginia, and Amanda Neitzel is, we couldn't let her go. She's here at Hopkins, so she's doing research at one of the centers here. So it's different than a postdoc. She's mostly sort of working on grant money and grant projects. But just gives you a little range of the sort of, in this case, academia, postdoc, and sort of the nonprofit research scientist kind of role. And we do have a few of our alums who are off in government doing this kind of stuff. All right, and next slide, you just get a little flavor for folks that are in the program right now. And there's Sue again on your left, that's who's doing the postdoc in Charlottesville. In the graduation picture, she's on the left. So let me do maybe one more slide on program fit, because I think this is a really, really big one and gets into the sort of similar questions to, when do I figure out an advisor kind of thing. So much about the PhD program is fit. Right. So, and we just had this conversation, right? You could be the absolute top student applying, but if there's not some faculty member who's interested in your sort of specific area, there's no reason to admit you, because it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for the faculty member. You're not going to find anything to do common research on. And so anyway. So here's my top 5 fit ideas. And so top 5 fit indicators if you are a good fit for Hopkins in particular. So number 1 is we are definitely a sort of apprenticeship kind of model. There is also a strong cohort experience, but if you're not finding the faculty member who or a couple faculty members who are doing stuff you're interested in, probably not honestly the top place you should be applying to. It might be good as sort of a secondary application, apply here anyway, just in case your other thing doesn't work out. But you're going to be working really closely with an advisor or a couple advisors. That's part of the reason to come here. And that is, I think, a strength of the program. And so if you're looking for more of a well-rounded cohort, or you've got stronger fits with an advisor at some other institution, you should be clear-eyed about all of that. If you're looking for an interdisciplinary approach, we talked about that a little bit, so I don't probably need to belabor that anymore. If you're looking for rigorous methodological training, so again, a little more quantitatively oriented. You saw 18 credits of research methods and statistics. There is a qualitative course. There are a number of students who are focused sort of more qualitatively, but on average, on the whole, it's probably the program has more of a quantitative feel to it. All right, this next one, this cryptic message of you want to learn methodological approaches of the future. So there is a big movement that has happened in medicine and sort of comparable crisis in psychology, and it's, I think, about to happen in education, where we educational researchers need to be a lot more open and transparent about what's happening, how we're conducting studies, what's going on under the hood. And so I hope you guys would agree, right? As good educational researchers, we should thoroughly analyze all our data, right? Okay. But you guys would agree that as good educational researchers, we should not be torturing our data until it tells us what we want to hear, right? You would agree with that. So like where does the two sides of the room, like where do those come together? So that's a really tough question, right? And so if both these things are true, and it turns out what has been happening a lot is people have been running so many different analyses that just by chance alone, you pop up with some kind of significant finding. And humans are great storytellers, so they can tell a great story about like, and then let me tell you, of course, my hypothesis made all the sense in the world because wild, elaborate story. And so here's the new knowledge for the world. And so people are starting to realize, whoa, I think this is a chance finding. It is not a real thing. It would never replicate. This is another tenet of open science. And so this idea of being very explicit about like, I'm going to test these hypotheses. I'm going to use these statistical models to test them, or this hypothesis and these qualitative coding approaches to find out if that's really what's happening. And I post that ahead of time. And then I promise to share the results no matter what. If I'm dead wrong, I'm going to tell you. If I'm absolutely right, I'm going to tell you. So that idea of stating your hypotheses up front is called pre-registration. So that's one of these open science practices. Notice that makes it a lot harder to find cool stuff and to then write up a paper that's going to get accepted by a journal. But I think in 5 years, everyone's going to be doing that. And so you will be getting trained on that kind of before a lot of people in a lot of other programs. And so on the one hand, it's a little bit of a trade-off, right? You maybe won't have as many papers out there. On the other hand, those papers 5 years from now are going to be like, oh yeah, that's still a good paper. And a bunch of these other ones are going to be like, oh yeah, I don't believe that. If you guys heard of growth mindset, so that is under a lot of tension and pressure right now for exactly these open science reasons. That maybe the researchers doing a lot of that work have just run so many analyses that they've found a lot of chance and very exciting findings, but we're not sure if we really believe them. So there's a meta-analysis that came out recently. All right, I'm digressing. So replications, pre-registration, open materials, like, hey, if you want to replicate my study, of course I should share the surveys I used, the interview protocol. If you want to see my data, I will, it's got to be anonymized, but I'm going to share my data. You can rerun all my analyses. And then preprints, right? So much of the world can't access top quality research because publishers put it behind expensive paywalls. So there are ways to make it publicly available. So that's open science. So you get a lot of open science if you come here. As you could tell, I could keep talking about this for the rest of our time.
Seminar.
Yeah. Almost got into teaching class there. You want to make an impact on educational practice and policy by bridging research. So there are absolutely PhD programs out there that you could join and get into that are super happy for you to do research for research sake. We don't know what the practical implications of this are, but like it was theoretically interesting. So good job for you for doing that. Here at Hopkins, we actually want to know both. We want to know why it's theoretically interesting and important from a sort of knowledge standpoint, but we also want it to impact the real world. And so as the sort of final of our, like, this is a good fit for you, our program is a good fit for you if you are really interested in doing research that has either at the policy level or the practice level impact on the real world. All right, let's advance one more. I think I got one more thing on this slide. There it is. So these top 5 indicators are kind of about the program and the cohort, and this just underscores your question. And what I was saying before is a ton of it comes down to the fit with your advisor. So it's like all this stuff, plus is there a good faculty mentor or a couple faculty mentors? Because it's not like you have to have all the things you're looking for in one person. It could be spread out over a couple people. But this is the top 5 indicators, very much sort of Hopkins centric, like that's what you get here. Is the right advisor here? I think that's good sort of global advice, kind of no matter what programs you're looking to. All right, let me pause here, I think, and see if there are any questions either in the room or might be one online, Seon. I'm not sure.
Looks like, let's see. We do have one question from Karen. It's, are there opportunities for EDD students to participate in faculty research, or are they reserved for PhD students?
Great question. So there's absolutely no reason that an EDD student couldn't hop into like a lab group or research group that a PhD faculty member is doing. No reason at all that shouldn't happen. The sort of inertia and momentum, though, is that most of the PhD faculty, when they're like, aha, I got a new grant, I'm starting a new project, they're going to look around among all the PhD students first. And so I think an EDD student would have to kind of make their own luck more, and happy to help make that happen. So feel free to have EDD students. But I think in general, it's not kind of where the momentum is. So faculty members looking for help on projects are going to typically, are going to typically kind of look among the PhD candidates. Anything else before we?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
What if the advisor they want to work with, he doesn't have funding?
So one of the great things I think about the Hopkins PhD program is it's 4 years of funding that is unattached. And so your advisor does not have to have any funding. They should have an active set of research questions they're asking and pursuing. Otherwise, there's not going to be that much for you to do. So do ask about that if and when you meet with prospective advisors. But unlike some other programs, and this would be a good thing to kind of research as you're looking around at different programs, there is no requisite for your advisor to have a grant for you to work on. There's some benefits if it does happen and it does work out that way, but you'll get your stipend and your funding one way or the other. All right. Yeah, let's shift on to so the next slide or two. I thought you guys would probably be excited to hear about, like, gosh, the application process is a little daunting. I've never done anything like this before. What can you tell me are good strategies? So number one, let's flip over. So communicating with key faculty. So we talked about how important the advisor is, particularly in the PhD application world. So there are a couple of really obvious questions that a number of students forget to ask, like, oh, are you actually taking students next year? Or are you retiring or going on sabbatical? Or, have 8.5 advisees and just can't take anymore. So, like, find that out. Step number one. Do they plan to be at the institution moving forward? So I gave the Amy Shelton example, who, yes, will still be here at the institution, but, taking on a very different role. So I probably should have asked her before using her as the big example, because I don't honestly know if she's taking on advisees or not, but you should be reaching out to faculty of interest and trying to calibrate this fit. Are they a good fit for you? Are you a good fit for them? And that's both on sort of research interests and topics, but also just on things like working style. You know, are they answering emails at 4 a.m. and that's how they like to do things, and that doesn't work for you at all? Or, you know, is that somehow like a happy marriage of obsessive people working late? All right, let's advance the slide one more. Don't put all your eggs in one faculty basket. So I think the PhD is this sort of like intensive, close relationship, advisor, advisee. But, you know, if you're like, I must work with Amy Shelton, and it turns out that your personalities just don't mesh, or she leaves, or your research interests change. Like, there are just tons of ways in which putting all your eggs in one basket could sort of end badly. You know, moving institution, moving role within the institution, change of interest, those kinds of things. Whereas if you have a couple faculty, you're like, it'd be kind of cool to work on this, and that's sort of an interesting topic. That tends to be, if there's sort of a key person who you'd really, really like to work with, and a couple of other people who probably might be good to work with, that's usually like a pretty good signal of like, this is a good program and fit. All right, and then on the next one, a couple thoughts on this personal statement that you'll end up inevitably writing. And we talked about this one too. Illustrate a research question, not a research topic. So super easy to say, I am interested in X, and that's great, and everyone should have that, and I'm not disparaging that. But I'm saying, if you want to, you know, really boost your odds of sort of getting faculty members interested, don't just give a topic, give a interested in questions like. And so it's a little like the previous conversation we had around, you know, don't say like, I will only work with Amy Shelton. Say, I'd be very interested in working with researchers like Amy Shelton, or who have interest in these topics. So you want to give sort of illustrations of research questions that are of interest to you, because that gives a little more wiggle room for faculty members to say like, oh, I see an overlap between your question and these other questions I've been asking for a long time. Whereas if you're too strong about like, I want to know the answer to research question X, the professor might be like, that's great, but I don't care that much. Whereas if you say, I'm really interested in these types of research questions, it sort of opens up a conversation a little bit more, and the faculty member can say, oh, so I'm not so much interested in that, but this question seems like it's in between two questions that you're really interested in. I think there might be a spot right around here that's what we should study together. And so it's this idea of sort of posing questions that would be interesting things to pursue research-wise, not just posing topics, because it's posing a research question signals that you're really ready to do research in a way that's sort of like, I'm interested in this topic. Sounds like you've got lots of good spirit, but I don't know if you're really ready to do research yet. And so that distinction, I think, could be the thing that kind of sets you guys and your applications apart from, you know, folks who've had different master's experiences and or aren't quite as ready as you guys might be to pursue a PhD. Does that make sense? All right, so other thing that I think can be helpful is putting yourselves inside the heads of the admissions committee. And this is certainly true for me, but I think I could speak for a lot of my colleagues, is the biggest question running through everyone's head as they read each and every one of your applications is, what is the potential of this candidate as a researcher? And so the reason I'm saying that is because I think there are a ton of sort of personal statements that we'll read that talk about sort of like overcoming odds and obstacles and really compelling personal stories, which are great. And I'm by no means saying don't do that. But if that's it and they stop there, it's like, wow, this person has overcome amazing odds. I'm really impressed with them. But at the end of the day, I have no idea if they'd be any good as a researcher. And ultimately, you know, it's not like I'm getting married to them, but 4 or 5 years in a program lasts a lot longer than a lot of marriages. So it is like, I do not want to make the wrong choice. And so I really need to have a very good answer to this question. What is this person's potential as a researcher? All right, let's advance the slide one more, and I promise I'll pick up the pace, because then I think admissions folks have a couple of slides coming up. Yeah, often get questions about like, well, who should write my recommendation letters? And I think, you know, number one, I'd refer you back to the question that I just asked. And so if your principal from when you were a teacher is like your closest friend, biggest advocate, but can't really say much of anything about your potential as a researcher, because that's just not what you guys talked about. Yeah, it's okay. It's maybe not a terrible recommendation because they'll say really nice things about you, but at the end of the day, they're not asking the main question that's on the admissions committee's mind. And so think about like, can your recommenders speak to that question? Can they reinforce what's in your personal statement? Can they say things about why they think your research area is so important, and make a more compelling case for that? Those are the kinds of things that I think are helpful to come out in recommendations. And part of the reason I mention this is because I always feel like recommendations are really hard. You know, if you guys think there's a lot of grade inflation in a master's program, or if you get like below a B, you're not even passing. Grade inflation on recommendations is like crazy, right? Faculty members will write 20 recommendations in a row that say, this is the single best student I've ever had in my entire lifetime. That's just not uncommon. And so then if you get someone who's like, yeah, amazing student, probably like number 15 in my all-time list. You know, everyone reads that as like, but maybe this is like one of the very few recommenders who's actually being honest. So anyway, the point being, it's really hard to read into all the sort of laudatory comments. And so I think a better use of your recommenders is, can they speak to your research topic? Can they speak to specifics about what can you do? Oh, this person has learned the statistical programming language R, and they have done these types of analyses. And they have written this kind of a paper. Those are specific concrete things that can't really be grade inflated, right? This person is the best at R I've ever seen in my 15-year career. Like, even that's a little better because it's more specific. Okay. So that would be a couple thoughts on sort of application strategies. Before I kick it over to admissions, anyone want to ask other questions about the application process or things that we've kind of covered on these last couple slides?
Yeah. Does recommenders have to be a doctor?
So it doesn't hurt at all. There's no requirement of it. And so I think, you know, if you get your aunt to write your recommendation letter who is not a doctor, you know, there's going to be like a little skepticism. You get your principal who is not a doctor, there's going to be less skepticism because they swim in a world that interfaces with educational research. If you get your master's level supervisor from AIR or RAND or one of these, that, you know, a lot less skepticism because all they do is educational research there. And so I think to the letters at the end of their name matter. Like some people reading recommendations are snobbier than others. But at the end of the day, do they have the credentials to speak about your promise as a researcher? Like that's kind of the litmus test I might use. So I wouldn't get overly worried about, are they a doctor? But it's not going to hurt if they are, for sure. And otherwise, just think about like, are they in a position where they can really credibly talk about my potential as a researcher? Please.
First, I want to say thank you, Dr. Dr. Gelbeck. This has been very informative.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm glad that I made it because I've been working really hard, and then so I had to make up an excuse to finally come to this meeting.
I won't tell.
Yeah. But I'm happy that I'm here because this is so important. I've got very, very important information other than what I have read from the website. So I think everyone here online and in person, we are pretty much sure that we want to be a researcher in the future, and then we want to just implement what we have found to make a difference in education. So so the question is how to get in. So that's what we've been talking about, the application process. I have graduated from IDGL, so I know the professors, the program lead of our program. So if I'm going to start to have a communication with the key faculties, what suggestions would you like to give to us? I mean, we can find those information from the website about, we have those pictures of those faculties. So what suggestions would you like to give us? Would you recommend us to just write to them one by one? Or are there, somebody else have done, something else?
Yeah, such a good question.
Yeah.
And actually, maybe we can make a note of that. I should probably include a slide for next year. So that's a great comment. So let's talk about within Hopkins first, right? So you've got all these sort of extra advantages here. You've got faculty that know other faculty. You may not have had any faculty who teach in the PhD program, but, Rich and Cynthia and Isaac and, like they're going to know various members of the PhD faculty. So I think one thing you could do is talk to your advisor in ITGL and sort of articulate through, like, here are my research interests. Here's what I'm thinking about studying. Who do you think would be good potential advisors for me? And so beginning to calibrate by getting some outside opinions about what a good advisor-advising match for you personally, specifically here at Hopkins, seems like a pretty easy sort of 15, 20-minute conversation to have. And then absolutely, like, reach out to the PhD faculty who might be of interest and just say, like, about to graduate ITGL, really, interested in the PhD program, really interested in studying X, and would love to hear more about your research on that topic. And so setting up either a Zoom meeting or in person, if these folks are around, to just get a feel for, are they accepting students? Are they still interested in these projects? Do they have some grants that are coming up that are going to lead to new projects? What would the actual, like, on the ground research look like if I were to come work with you next fall? Those kinds of things. So little background with your own ITGL faculty and then reaching out to PhD faculty, I think, are the biggest things. Obviously do your homework on the website too, because that'll tell you, at least in broad brushstrokes, this group of faculty I probably don't need to worry about because there's not a lot of overlap there. But this second group of faculty might be of interest, and I'll get my advisor to help me think through which ones. And then third, your other big advantage, you got all these PhD students running around the building. And so talk to some of them. So as soon as you identify, I think advisors X, Y, and Z might be good fits, see if you can figure out what students are already working with them and talk to those students and say, like, hey, I'm applying for the PhD program this fall. I know you work with Dr. So-and-so. Would love to hear, sit down, meet with you for like half an hour and get a feel for what it's like to work in that research group or with that professor. So those would be the three things for like within Hopkins. So then if you're also applying elsewhere, which certainly you would be encouraged to do, you're not going to have the same access to the grad students. You're not going to have the same access to faculty who know faculty. So you got to start on the website. And then from there, I think you can identify the high probability, like, okay, two of this person's research interests have no overlap with mine, but the third seems pretty promising. And it seems like that third one might actually be their top research interest. So I'm going to shoot them an email and try to set up a meeting. And I always think it's a good way to sort of broach that meeting to just talk about fit and say, you know, I have interests in X, and, you know, keep it kind of short and sweet. You could attach your CV if you want to, that never hurts. I notice you have interest in Y, which I'm particularly interested in. I think there's maybe some neat overlap there. I will say just one other thing in the sort of like insider tip category. I think there are some faculty members who are sort of interested in clones. I want someone who fits my research almost exactly as possible. I'm not in that camp. I like optimal misfit. You got to do some of the same stuff I'm doing for me to be interested in working with you. Otherwise, like, what do we have in common? But if we do exactly the same stuff, I'm not going to learn as much from you. And this is very much a two-way street. And so I'm in the sort of optimal misfit camp. I think others are in the like, I want to clone camp. And so talking about fit and seeing if you can figure out some of this in a meeting would be good. And then asking them, are there some students who are working with you who it might be also useful for me to get in touch with. So it's a similar set of things, but you don't have quite the same backdoor channel.
Wow, thank you so much.
Sure, yeah. Is there an online question? And I know we're getting low on time here.
No, it looks like Dr. Galbag, we were able to take care of some of the questions.
Okay, great. Why don't I kick it over to admissions for a last few details on sort of nuts and bolts of admissions requirements?
All right, thank you, Dr. Galbach. Now we're going to continue by going over the application requirements. Applicants must submit a completed application, which can be found on our school's website. Please note the application fee is waived for our SOE alums. Your personal statement should not exceed more than 750 words. In addition to the personal statement, a writing sample must be submitted, and this would be a sample of your most professional writing that demonstrates your analytic and critical writing skills. Moving on, you should plan on submitting 3 letters of recommendation. It is recommended that these letters should include at least the following: 2 submitted by faculty members who are familiar with your previous academic work, and 1 by a supervisor or administrator who has been in a position to evaluate your professional development. We'll need official GRE scores. We'll also need official transcripts, and most likely we'll probably have your official transcripts on file here at SOE. However, any new courses or degrees that are not on file at SOE will have to be sent to the Office of Admissions. And lastly, an interview may be required. Please note the application deadline date is December 15, 2022. All materials, including official transcripts, letters of recommendation, and test scores must be received by the admissions office on or before the December 15, 2022 deadline for full consideration.
So I think we're kind of out of time, which is great. Really appreciated you guys helping make this more interactive. I'm happy to stick around for a couple more minutes if people have questions here. I'm happy to, I think admissions might need to go. I'm happy to leave the Zoom thing on for a minute if there are other questions from online. But otherwise, let me just say a huge thank you. It's fun to be able to do this for Hopkins students, especially, and alumni. And so thanks for coming out for this. I had a good time. Yeah, I'm just really excited to hopefully see a bunch of your applications by December 15th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And here, and Dr. Galba, I'll just leave this slide. This is some important contact information. Any admissions related questions, please reach out to Tanya McMillan. Her information is on here, email and phone number. And then also for a program related question, Raven Minervino, and her email address is on this slide. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Dr. Galbeck, for the wonderful presentation.
Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Alexis, to your question, yes, these get recorded and posted on a website. To the question of, is it a full-time PhD program? It is indeed. I can't imagine any way to not be at it full-time. Is it GRE mandatory? It is at this moment, with no particular plans to change that, at least none that I'm aware of. Yeah, please.
Minor question, back when we talked about the courses and stuff, I know we're talking about focus on sociology, psych, and like policy. Were those like, you take courses in like kind of all those areas, or was like you choose one and it affects your coursework? Or?
So those core courses are interdisciplinary in nature, but they're taught by faculty. So like I teach the science of learning, so you're going to get a lot of psychology in there. There are definitely going to be some readings from some sociologists and some other folks. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're getting a lot of psychology. The sort of schools as organizations, are you getting some, you know, sort of non-sociology? Yes, absolutely. Again, it's interdisciplinary. So it's both sort of like a bit interdisciplinary within course, taught by people coming from the disciplines, but then by having you guys experience both the sort of psychology and then the sociology and policy, you get in some ways we're training you to be much better, stronger interdisciplinary researchers than we are, if that makes sense. And so it's sort of both within course, but especially between courses.
I was asked about the writing sample. I was wondering which kind of writing sample would be better, the one that is relevant to the programs that I am applying to, or the one that I think that is the most polished or well-written?
So I'm gonna give you sort of a different answer, which is, let's think back to the like what's going on in the heads of the admissions committee. And they're like, what is the promise? They're thinking, what is the promise of this prospective student as a researcher? And so whether it is more on topic or more polished are probably both a little less important than does it signal that this person can do research? So for example, if you already have a conference presentation that shows that you can do rigorous research and it got presented at a computer science conference, that might be not a bad choice for your writing sample, even though it's like not super on topic. In the abstract, it's really hard to say like more polished or more on topic. Like obviously we love both. But I think thinking hard about what is going to really signal that I know how to do research, or that I don't know everything about doing research, but I'm very promising in terms of my ability to do research. So that's not a real answer, but hopefully helpful. Is there a difference in the graduation certificates between EDD and PhD, or the difference will just show up on the student's transcript? Well, they're pretty different degrees, and I think most people who are interested in hiring are going to know the difference between an EDD and a PhD. They're going to expect the PhD to be this sort of producer of research. You're going to expect an EDD to be a leader, a practitioner, and to be sort of a wise and savvy consumer of research. In terms of what actually shows up on the transcript, like, yes, there are definitely different letters. I'm not quite sure what else the question is asking, but I think very different degrees, different programs, different signaling on the transcript are, all those things are true. And I think I got the other question about the full-time clinician. I think you would have to leave your job. I don't, there are no students who I'm aware of who are working even close to full-time. You're very much expected to, put in several hours a week, not just on coursework, but on doing research. So again, I'll hang out for a couple of minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and shut down the Zoom. But again, thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. It's lots of fun. And you know where I live. You know how to get a hold of me. So if any other questions come up, Tanya's there. If it's sort of logistical questions about admissions, Raven's there. She knows tons about the program and the stipends and those sorts of things. And then if it's sort of more substantive questions about the program, I'm probably your best bet for those. So thank you guys so much. Oh, weekly time commitment. Just at the very end, moments to spare. It depends a little where you are at in the program. But I think there are probably few students who feel like they're putting in less than like 30, 35 hours a week on all things combined, and probably lots of students who feel like they're putting in a fair bit more than that. That would be a great question if and when you meet with grad students to ask them. So, all right, good rest of your afternoon, everyone. See ya.